Hello and welcome to episode 417 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now on today's episode, I have a returning guest and I'm thrilled to announce that I'm joined by Grant Nicholas from the awesome band Feeder. I don't know exactly how long it's been, probably a couple of years since he first came on, and it was a great interview. So when I had the opportunity to catch up and get him back on Mark and Me, I jumped at the chance. Growing up, Polythene was one of my most listened to albums of all time. Genuinely could not stop listening to them. Got to see them loads of times, and I think Grant is one of the best British songwriters out there, so I'm so happy that he's back today. Now, behind the scenes, this interview was actually recorded probably about 6 months ago, and due to a Zoom error where it would not convert the file, here you go, this is how true it is. I had to sit there and basically somehow, I don't know, fix this file, and it's taken me absolutely ages. I thought I lost it, I was going to scrap it, and then I've read on some forum how to get around it, and now we've actually been able to save the file. It's worked and it's now available. So during this interview, there's going to be a few moments where I'm like, what are you doing for the rest of the year? And he's teasing a big announcement, which is now out there. But I won't spoil it until the end, and you may not know the announcement, so it's quite good that I'll keep you in suspense. But what I do want to say is that this is a great interview. Grant is on form, and I can't wait for you to listen. But just before I hit the play button, let's quickly touch base and talk about my last episode. It was only a week ago, and I was joined by Anthony Ranieri, the lead singer from the awesome band Bayside. I want to say now a massive thanks to everyone that listened. Bayside and Anthony shared it on social media, so the numbers were insane. I saw loads of new listeners, loads of comments on YouTube, and I just want to say thanks to everyone that took the time to listen. But now it's all about today's episode, and I'm so thrilled that I'm joined by Feeder. So here's me and Grant Nicholas talking all things music. So Grant, welcome back to the Mark and Me podcast.
Good to be back. Yeah, it's been a while. Was it 2 years? We were just talking about it earlier, but
yeah, I think it was just before the release of Torpedo, and you were talking about you were writing your next follow-up album at that point, even before Torpedo had come out. So I think it's been a good couple of years.
Yeah, I know. Well, there was actually quite a lot of songs, and we were going to make that was going to be a double album originally, Torpedo, and then I changed my mind. So there were songs that were left over from that. Plus, I wrote a load more stuff, so it became like a double album again. So it's almost like a trilogy in some way, because they feel like very much like connected. And I wanted the 3 record. Well, I'm calling it 3 records because it's obviously a double album, Black Red. I wanted them to be like sonically, felt like they came from the same core. You know what I mean?
For anyone that's tuning in today, obviously you've been on before, but it wasn't video, it was audio. And what I love to do with all guests that come on, Grant, you'll know this from last time you came on, is kind of go on a bit of a nostalgia trip. And I do want to know, when you were growing up as a kid, can you remember those first tapes or CDs you had that you remember absolutely falling in love with?
Yeah, I know. I should say the word bootlegging, should I? Because in those days, I know it sounds so wrong, but that's why I discovered like a lot of music. When you're a young kid, you can't always afford to buy records. So I used to borrow like mates' albums and then put them on, like a little cassette, and then listen to them over and over again until it got chewed up. But yeah, I mean, lots of stuff really. I remember listening to my dad used to, he's sort of into music, but he's not like a massive, he's not an expert on music, but he was really into Beach Boys and ABBA and stuff like that. So I remember listening to that when I was really young in his car. But I suppose when I really got into, started to really find music, it was probably from my older brother and stuff like that, and just like friends that lived locally. So it was a real mixture of anything from sort of ELO, Kate Bush, Beatles, Sex Pistols, The Police, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin.
Wow.
It was a real mixture, where, I was really into like songs. So I didn't really care if I didn't really label it as rock or it's punk or whatever. I just kind of like, I was kind of more into the songs, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I know you talked last time about being a huge fan of people like Tom Petty for their
Oh,
songwriting
God, yeah.
ability and the overall song itself, not just the lyrics or the melodies. It's the song, and that's what
Mm.
that's what made you want to pick up a guitar and be like that.
It is, yeah. I mean, Tom Platt. I mean, his songwriting style. It sounds actually very simple, but I just love the way it doesn't matter where you're from, you still find some sort of connection in his songs. Even when he sings about kind of the whole Americana thing and sort of life in towns, wherever it is. I still felt like there. It could be because I came from from like a small town in Wales, but there's a lot of kind of like similarities there in some way. And I just love his style of songwriting. It's hard to write songs that simple and make them sound good. And I think it's been a real, there's been a real learning thing for me listening to artists like that. I mean, even people like John Lennon, some of his solo work was really simple. And even at the time when it came out, it was quite criticized by the press. But now it's become this iconic thing. I mean, just the whole beauty in writing songs that are simple, that have really great messages in them. And I think Tom Petty was kind of one of those artists.
Do you think there's a concern that sometimes the whole less is more is great, but as a songwriter, your brain's just doing too much. You can't just settle and think that's fine just to do verse, chorus, end, but you have to be like, I need to put a bridge in there. I need to keep this more interesting.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's taken me 30 years just to realize that. I've always been quite structured in the way I songwrite, and people might say, "Oh, he does the same thing," but that's what I do, and I'm very much a lot of the artists that I like have that style. It's not something; it's something you just do naturally. I think everyone has their own thing. I'm really into different arrangements and having lots of sections, but I think sometimes if a song doesn't need it, why put it in there? And I think hopefully, as I've done more recording and written more songs, I've learned a bit more and I feel as though now I'm in a much better place. I mean, I'm not saying that writing songs has got any easier because, to get a song that connects with people is really difficult.
Yeah,
But I think the key is you have to find a song that connects with yourself and the band first. You have to like it. Otherwise, you're kind of compromising your art form a bit.
yeah, totally.
Of course, you want people here to love it afterwards. I mean, that's the whole point. But if you don't like it or you don't get that moment, when you're in the studio or playing live, you just think, wow, this is the best thing I've ever done. That doesn't last you for very long. It just lasts you for that one moment. But that one moment is so magical. And I think you have to get to that place. Otherwise, there's something not quite right. Either you're compromising what you really want to do, or it's not a very good song.
Do you feel like you've always been in control of your own songs? The labels haven't got too involved. You've been able to write the songs you want and the way they sound, or have you kind of sometimes had to? I know you said you've taken so many years to realize it, but have you sometimes had to be compromised and be like, this isn't quite how I want, but I can see that makes it a bit more poppy or a bit more radio friendly?
I think we've been quite lucky. We've been on sort of like semi-major labels, but we've always been on kind of independent labels, apart from when
Yeah,
we to like Electro Records in America on our first album. But you know, there's always. I mean, what I would say the compromises are things, and I remember always having arguments about it with like the label or whoever's doing the radio. Can we have this song but with less guitars on, or can we take all the guitars off because it'll get more? And I was like, that's not really what we are as a band. I don't. There's only so far that I would compromise. I wouldn't mind. I was okay doing like the odd radio mix and stuff like that because you had to play the game a bit in America, especially. But I would always felt a bit uncomfortable with it. I said,
yeah.
well, look, if they like the song, they're going to play it. And if the guitars are seen as a little bit too rocky, who cares? That's what we are as a band. So I think we've been quite lucky. There's been times where maybe certain singles I wouldn't have picked personally, or I felt, wasn't sure if it was the right choice. I think we've been pretty lucky. We've had a lot of freedom and I think every band, there's always a time where, there has to be a little bit of give and take, and you have to listen to like radio pluggers and things like that. But we've been pretty lucky. I think apart from maybe a few odd single choices here and there, we've done pretty well.
Has there been any songs that were crying out for you to be a single and you didn't get over the line that you just listen back now and think, I wish that had had its kind of shining
Like
moment?
spot now, yeah. I mean, probably quite a few, but I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, just on a rock level, listening back to, I listened to some of our first album, Polythene, the other day. I haven't heard it for so long because we were thinking of doing some more stuff on the tour. So I was trying to remember how to play them. But there was a song there called "My Perfect Day," which was a really key song for us when we were, you know, touring and on our first album, and it was just one of those songs that helped us get a record deal. And I can't believe that was never a single. It might not seem like the obvious 3 minute song, but there's enough hooks in that song. It's got big guitars, it's anthemic, it's undeniably feeder. I always felt, oh, that should have been a single.
Do you know that's genuinely one of my favorite tracks from you
Oh,
guys,
is
and
it?
I was always gutted that you never got to. I've never got to see it live. I've seen you many times, probably 20 times live, but never
I remember
seen it.
playing, I remember playing that song in New York. We were trying to get a record deal, and it was the like, oh God, what's it called? Not CM. Is it CMJ? Was it the New York? Was it CMJ? Where they have all the bands playing, labels come and see you.
Yeah,
Kind of, it's like bands in every venue all over New York, and we played CBGBs, like the legendary CBGBs, which is no longer there now. And it was the original one. It was an absolute dive. I just remember it, but it was an iconic place to play. But we were a three-piece, so we just kind of turned up and did our thing. And I remember that was one of the most important songs of the set. It was before I'd written High, and I know that Electric Records were really into that song. And I remember playing it now, that clearly it just had a vibe to it. It just had a really good chemistry, and it was just one of those songs where you could take all the heavy guitars off it and just keep that little sort of like guitar line, that delay part it had, and it still stood up.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean that's one that I felt should have always been a single, but there's probably dozens more. I was just trying.
When I listen back to you guys, even from the Swim EP and all the early stuff, everything from the very start, I always feel like you've always. I don't know you individually, but I feel like you've had your sound the way you want it. Like when you listen to stuff like Insomnia and stuff like that, the guitars are heavy. Like that's not a mellow radio polished song. I think the guitars sound quite rough and distorted, and I think I always felt like you are a heavy band, if that makes sense. You could, that's why I could see you, and that's why you played Download, but also you could do V Festival. You had a nice mix of, they're poppy enough that people can sing along and sell millions and have lots of people, sing along to the chorus of High and stuff like Buck Rogers. But you've also got the heavy elements that put you in that band that can play with, Bush or Everclear and other bands like that.
Yeah, we've shared stages with like Queens of the Stone Age and
Yeah,
and Chili Peppers and all sorts. Some much heavier bands. We've been on the same stage as like Slipknot. Something that Corey the singer was actually was a bit of a fan. I'm not sure it's true, but you know we're pretty heavy. When we do heavy stuff, it's pretty up there, and I think
it
people
is.
people are quite surprised because some people just know Feeder for maybe some of the more radio obvious songs, like, obviously you mentioned Buck Rogers Just a Day, but I mean, Just the One Feeling a Moment, the more kind of, more anthemic stuff. We've still got guitars on it, but it's super melodic. But, if you go into songs like Godzilla and, some of the early stuff like Shade and even some of our new stuff like Playing with Fire and Torpedo and, songs like Magpie, I mean, they're up there with, they're heavy. You can put those next to like Metallica or anyone, they stand up. We're a heavy metal pop band, and that's what I've always said. And I love melodies, but I love distortion. And I think if you sit it in the right place, it works because it gives a nice melody, which some people, it doesn't scare people. I'm not a screamy, shouty kind of. I'm not into that. I like to use. I never wanted to be a singer, so I use my voice like it's almost like an instrument. It was just a way of me writing songs. I ended up being a singer just because I used to sing along. And one day someone said, "Hey, you should do the lead vocals, not just the backing vocals." And I was like, "No, I can't sing." And anyway, I did, and it just grew from there. So I still feel slightly uncomfortable when people say, "Oh, you're the lead singer with Feeder." I'm the guitarist singer with Feeder. That's how I see myself. But
How crazy is that though, dude? Like the fact that you weren't ever in your head the singer and frontman of Feeder
no, I
when
was way too
that's
excited to be a front, to do that. I'm not an sort of like crazy front man. I mean, what I do, I'm just genuine. I am what I am, and people can say, well, that's boring, whatever. But I'd rather go on stage and just play the songs, like the best I can, and just be me, and us be us as a band. I think it's more genuine. I prefer that. And yeah, we're still here, so obviously somebody likes that. At least it's honest and it's kind of real.
what is it do you think that keeps you going and keeps you wanting to write? The fact that last time you came on and you've talked about this kind of trilogy, unofficial trilogy of Torpedo, and then the double album for Black and Red. the fact that you're writing probably, what, 30, 40 songs that year to get that over the line, to get those 3 albums done, there must be something inside you that is nowhere near ready to burn out anytime soon.
I really don't know what it is. I just got this, uh, real energy and thirst for, for songwriting and for continuing like the Feeder legacy or whatever. I think we're a band that some people, haven't even like discovered our music. I know it's a weird thing to say. My daughter said this to me. I went to see the Smashing Pumpkins and Weezer like the other night.
How was
Two
that, by the way? I didn't get I
bands,
wanted to go and see them, and it looked amazing.
two bands that we've been compared to in a bizarre kind of way, and we sit somewhere between the two in a weird kind of way
You
because
do massively.
we have the pop thing that Weezer have, but even Pumpkins, and they always had pop songs. They have, they're not that dissimilar to us. We used to get compared to them. Feeder like the British Smashing Pumpkins, and I get that because we had, we're influenced by very similar music. I'm sure, like growing up, we're similar age as well. I'm a guitar player that sings. Same as Billy Corgan, and he obviously likes a bit of fuzz as well. And so my daughter said to me, she goes, "Don't you wish that you were an American band, Dad?" She's 19, my daughter.
Wow.
I went, "Well, why do you say that?" Because he goes, "Because I reckon if you were an American band, you'd be much bigger." And I thought about it, and I thought, actually, I know what she means, and maybe she's right. Maybe being a UK band doing the music we do, which is somewhere people like describe Feeder as being and almost like a mid-Atlantic sound.
Yeah.
Kind of influenced by UK acts, but also all the US stuff where it's like classic rock or whatever it is. And I get that. It's just always an interesting question, but I thought to myself, yeah, maybe it would have been. I mean, because you can't deny that there are some great British bands and some never quite got there. And I remember even in the 90s, there was a few that went under the radar. I thought, God, this band are great. And I went to America and we toured there for a year. We learned a lot about playing live and that craft. American bands seem to have this kind of natural ability on stage, whether it's ingrained into them because they have to be more that way, be a bit more entertaining.
Yeah.
But a lot of bands were just really good. They were just confident. And I was like, oh, wow. And I learned a little bit of that craft. And it takes time because it can become a bit cliche as well if you're not careful. But I do think that American rock bands that come over here, and I'm not dissing them because there's some amazing bands that I love, but I do think they get a lot more attention than a lot of the British bands who are brilliant, who are homegrown. And I think we fell into that trap a little bit.
But in the same breath, there's not many British bands that have headlined Download Festival 2005,
No.
wasn't it? It was you.
I think we tried to get there again not long ago. And they said, "Oh, if we don't heavy enough," I was like, "Have you actually heard our sets? We're we're a death metal band, but we're heavier than quite a few bands on Download lineup."
Well, this year they've got Busted on the second stage, so
yeah, I know. We would do it again. They have Biffy Clyro, bands like that there. Obviously I know those guys for years. They used to open for us. And it's like, well, we're not that dissimilar. It's like, well, I don't see why, and also we're a band that have, we're not out to prove anything. We do what we do and people know what we do. And when we did Download that I can't remember what year it was. What was it?
2005.
I remember that being quite a tough gig. And I thought Download, I think they were trying to make Download a bit more like Reading used to be, a bit more kind of a bit more indie as well, not quite so metal kind of, because people thought of it as being very, and I think we were kind of, I think it was the first year they tried to put something different on. They had us and Garbage and a few bands they wouldn't normally have on there maybe, and it was a pretty tough gig. But I do remember thinking, oh, let's do the heavier songs. So we did like Descend and some of those big heavy ones from our first record, thinking, oh, these are damn brilliant. And it was kind of all right, but quite hard work. And I thought, oh God, and I was getting really angry and frustrated, thinking we're headlining Download. It's not going as well as I wanted. And then we started playing some of the more commercial stuff like Insomnias and Just a Day and Buck Rogers. And then it started to go off. So it's all these like metalers and all their Slipknot t-shirts, where it was all like going crazy to it, but they didn't really go crazy to the heavy stuff. So you never quite know. I think it's not about being heavy. It's about just having songs that people know as well at festivals,
Yeah, I saw the first headline set from Biffy Clyro when they were there, and everyone was kind of like, fuck Biffy Clyro, they're not heavy enough and all this.
Yeah.
And I really respected that when Simon went on, they still played Many of Honor and all the songs that
Yeah,
are very, very radio friendly and very poppy. And I
yeah,
love that they didn't just play the first two albums. As much as I loved the first early
yeah,
stuff by
yeah,
Biffy, I respected that they did like the set they would normally do. And do you know what? The proper fans stuck around, sang every single
yeah.
lyric with him, and it was a magical moment. But when I look at the poster for you for Download and Ozfest at the time, it's like Feeder, Garbage, Dinosaur Jr.,
Yeah.
and the next day it's like Black Sabbath, and then it's System of a Down and Slayer and Slipknot, and I still to
Yeah.
this day think, wow, what a moment! Like Feeder headlined Download. No one
All
can take
those
that from
bands,
you.
all those heavier bands, he's mentioned. I'm a massive Sabbath fan. They were one of the first bands that I play guitar to, and a huge influence on me as as a guitar player. There wouldn't be a lot of the Feeder songs if it wasn't for Black Sabbath. And I think people don't, people realize that. I love really heavy stuff as well.
Yeah,
It's I'm just not out to prove to be heavy for the sake of it. Well, when we go heavy, it's really great and it's dynamic. But I just find just as a band, like sonically and also as a songwriter, just what we do is it's kind of mad, and I don't even try and analyze it anymore because it's just a mixture of all those influences like growing up. But at the end of the day, it's us, and we can go from a bouncy song like Insomnia, and then suddenly do you know something much heavier, and it works because people that know the band know we do that. You
yeah.
know, it's like if we didn't know Smashing Pumpkins and you hear 1979 and then he went and then he saw them play. I don't know if I can say it on air, like a song like Silverfuck. You probably think, is
Yeah.
it a big band? It's only because you recognise his voice.
No, it's
But like,
true.
they're a million miles away. There's drum machine on there, and that's what I love about them. But because they're great songs, it works. And I know when they did, was it the album after? Or was it what was with the quite electronic one? Is it Adore or something?
Yeah, Adore. They had
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There's actually some really good songs on that, but it got really slated by a lot of fans. People just didn't really because Billy was like, oh, rock's over for a while, whatever it was. But there were some great songs in it, and I think he just wanted to do something different, experiment. They've always been into that, and I think, well, now some of those songs are really popular. It's just that what you just got to do what you do. You can't tick every box. You just got to do the music that you love and as I said earlier on, and just hope that your fans like it. You know, that's
I
all you can.
think what you said about Weezer and Smashing Pumpkins is a really, really valid point. That you are kind of bang in the middle of those two bands, and I hear
Yeah.
elements of Smashing Pumpkins definitely with your music, definitely, and even Weezer. And I think
Hmm.
that would have been a perfect bill if you had just gone on with them. Imagine you
Well,
three
we did
touring.
try and get on that bill, but it was already booked up, and we said, well, we didn't really want to go on. Yeah, I said actually I would have gone on first because I actually love all the bands, but some people might say, oh, why are you going on first? Because you'd probably be on about 6:30 when the doors are opening. But it would have been a great lineup. That would have been.
What a night, yeah.
Oh, that would have been a fantastic lineup. I mean, maybe if there'd been a full band bill and they'd had a band on before, we would have done it. But anyway, it didn't happen. But but if we got off with that one, I'd play with either of those bands because I think they're great. Got some great songs and they were really good. But yeah, I mean, I'm only mentioning them. I mean, especially because they've been around, for a long time as we have. Um, and it's hard to name that many great guitar bands that are similar to what we do in some way that are
No,
still
definitely.
from our era. So um, yeah, and I think '90s music's had a little bit of it sort of seems quite popular with a lot of young kids. I mean, I'm noticing so much '90s influence now with a lot of new artists or kind of newish artists, whether it's Bieber Doobie and people like that. It's all that '90s thing going on there as well. And I think that's quite encouraging because at least kids are getting, hearing some guitar music again, because it's still pretty bad on radio. I have to admit, they don't play enough rock still. It's the same old thing. It goes in waves, you know.
Yeah.
It's so difficult. Anyway, so I'm
No,
just
no,
kind of,
it's absolutely true, and I've not heard. I mean, there's bands that have suddenly come along and blown up, like Sleep Token, who are heavy,
yeah,
and that they're really getting massive now, and they'll be future headliners for Download and stuff. But I miss that kind of the bands like we've mentioned, Everclear, Bush, Hell is for Heroes, Hundred Reasons, Biffy Clyro, all these bands that were having such an amazing time, and they're coming back now and celebrating their albums with like 20th anniversary
yeah,
tours
yeah,
and stuff. But I do feel there's there's a gap in the industry, and I'm missing those sort of bands. There's really heavy bands and there's really soft acoustic bands. There's nothing in the middle.
Yeah, I think we kind of, we're sort of in the middle in some way because obviously when we put out singles, there's always going to be a song that you think that's going to be more, that's got more chance of getting on some sort of radio. Because as soon as you hear anything we do with loud guitars, and they're like, Feed are a heavy metal band, and some actually think we're a heavy metal band, or they see us as being a heavy rock band because we came through Kerrang magazine and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm really proud of that, but in some way, I'd rather not be played on the station that I think is really not particularly us, just for the sake of it, and lose what our identity as a band. But if a very commercial station wants to play it, like a Feeder song, then that's great because it does reach us out to a bigger audience. But it's a double-edged sword, really, because you want to keep your credibility, you want to keep what you are, but you also don't want to feel, but you also want people to hear your music,
But it also works in its favour. The fact you've done Download, and then you can do Reading and Leeds, and you could do V Festival back in the day, and Tea in the Park. There's not many bands that can kind of cater to all needs.
We're quite lucky in that respect. We toured with Coldplay on a Rushing Blood to the Head, and it was around Comfort and Sound here, and that was a big record for us. We were a pretty good support band, I think, and it had. We toured with, we played with Rolling Stones. We played with U2, and it kind of worked.
It does.
We played with Bryan Adams not long ago, and we were thinking, "Oh God, is this going to work?" I mean, I grew up listening to early Bryan Adams stuff, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Like Runchy's a classic rock song. But we thought, what's the worst that can happen? I thought people that are into Bryan Adams are either going to be people that have grown up with rock. It might be classic rock, and it might be some of that, like kind of very American stuff. That Bryan Adams has written a lot of love songs, so there's going to be quite a lot of mums and daughters there as well. So it was exactly that kind of audience. Quite a mixed age group. Obviously quite a lot of other fans, but they didn't seem too scared of us. Even when we were playing like songs, we played like Kyoto every night when we played.
That's awesome.
And I thought we've got to show the audience this is what we are as well, because otherwise they're going to go and buy one of our albums and realize that that isn't what we are. So so we did that, and it went down great because I suppose that audience, they would have heard Black Sabbath, they would have heard Led Zeppelin, great. It didn't really scare them. It still worked because there's always some sort of melody in our stuff, even when we get heavy. So maybe that's why we can sometimes get away with playing with lots of different types of bands that aren't necessarily heavy rock bands.
Because you've been there and done it all, and over the last 20 years especially, you've literally played with the Rolling Stones, which is mind-blowing. You mentioned you supported Coldplay on their Best Albums tour, I believe. You've played with all these incredible bands. You've headlined festivals. For you personally, is there anything left to try and go for and reach out and try and achieve? Because I feel like surely when you started Feeder, if I had told you you'll headline Download and you'll play Isle of Wight and you'll do Reading, you'd be like, no way, no fucking way. But you've done it all. So is there anything left to kind of go after? Or are you just doing it now because you just love what you do?
Kind of a bit of both, really. I feel as though, there's always that, I'm sure you would have read, if you looked at any of our, now, with social media, everyone has a view and everyone's a critic and stuff. And so it is pretty tough. And I do social media. I'm not great on it, and I don't do it too much. Hopefully, I don't think, I don't want to be on there all the time. But I'm one of those people that people go, "Oh, don't read the comments." But it's really hard, isn't it, not to, when you work so hard on a record? You want to hear what people think of it. So, in the old days, you have some album reviews and there'd be some really good ones, and there'd always be one or two like, "Oh God, don't read the review. Don't show the review."
Yeah, stay away from Kerrang.
Yeah, they'd always hide it from me because I would just be broken. I'd be like, "Don't talk to him for at least 2 weeks after he's read it." But now you kind of have to read that all the time by just somebody you don't even know. So it's a very weird world now. You have to be a bit more thick-skinned and not take it too personally, I think. But it goes back to that, what I said earlier on. If you believe in it, just keep going. Just don't be too broken by it.
Do you take any of the comments to heart, Grant?
Yeah,
be honest, because
I'm quite a sensitive person. Of course I do, because I love. I really, as a band and person, I've put a lot of time into this. I'm not saying that justifies everyone liking your music, but I do think the Feeder's a good band. I think, you always read the comment, "Oh, Feeder is so underrated." And I find that comment slightly winds me up because I partly agree, but I also feel as though the word underrated feels like a failure word to me. I don't think we're underrated. I just think we've always been a bit under the radar. We've been successful, but we've never really been in people's faces. We've never been as big as Foo Fighters or Coldplay. We've been somewhere just under the radar, but we were very close to maybe, we had Muse, like supporting us, before they blew up. And I thought this band are going to do really well. And then, what was it? 3 years later, we ended up. it's
It's a
like,
weird world.
it's a weird world, but that's the way it is. But I think, there is a lot of luck in this industry. And I think it's about having the right song at the right time, having maybe the right management, the right label, being in the right musical climate at that time when if you can have the best songs ever, but if it's not, the right musical climate, they sometimes don't have a chance. And I think we've dropped some albums where it's just been the wrong time, or maybe
Yeah.
the wrong team around it. And I feel there is a few feeder albums. I think that when I hear them now, I think, God, if I could re-record that, I think that's a really good record. And I feel as though it just didn't really get much of a chance. I'm sure even the biggest bands, everyone has that. You can't avoid it, can't. But I mean, just off the top of my head, I mean, I think Silent Cry is a really strong album, and I think if I could go back to making that album, or if you put that album out now, I think it would get a lot more attention. I honestly do.
But isn't it funny with music because it's like a bookmark in your life. It's like this album's coming out at this point. This is the feelings I had, the emotions I had, the reasons I wanted to write the songs. But that doesn't go away. So bands like Nirvana, Kurt obviously, unfortunately, was a very depressed guy and took his own life, but he left a legacy of music. And now people are discovering that In Utero is some of the best songs out there. But when it came out, everyone was like, this is shit. It's nothing like Nevermind. It's a terrible album. It's got a horrible production. But now we'd look at it and go, it's some of the best things he's ever done. So with Feeder, even though at that moment you feel like the album or the management or everything wasn't quite in line, there's kids that come into your gigs now. I come to your gigs and I see 18-year-olds and 16-year-olds and people with their
Yeah.
parents. They will now go back and listen to your early work and discover it for the first time and be like, this album's fucking ace, Dad. I absolutely love this album. It's like, to you, it might be like, oh, I didn't really dig that album at the time, but it doesn't matter because it's there forever for people to discover.
I know, that is so true. And I kind of, there's been a point where I've really not particularly been that complimentary about some of the things I've written, and some of the albums. Been pretty hard on myself, and I'm pretty hard on myself anyway. So it doesn't matter what anyone wants to write about me. I can guarantee I'm a lot worse than myself. it's but the thing is, it's like actually really therapeutic songwriting. I know it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but for me, it really is, and it's something which I'm very connected to, and I have to do, and I love doing it. But it's a massive process. I mean, I'm so lucky that I'm still doing something which I love doing, and I actually make a living out of music. Um, but there is a lot of soul searching and a lot of work that goes into it as well. And I think people have to realize that. And I think as you get older as a band, you have to almost push harder. It's not you've got almost like less to prove, but you also want to try and you want to get to that next place. You don't know where that place is sometimes. You can't be 18 again.
No.
But you have to kind of do it like gracefully. Look, if there comes a time where I feel like I really can't do the feeder set anymore, I just can't sing anymore at all, I just don't have anything there, then I won't do it. I can promise you that. I'm not going to be flogging this band into the ground. I'd rather stop. I'd rather leave the party, before I made a total fool of myself. But at the moment, I feel as though the band is sounding good. Physically, I'm not saying I can do everything I could do when I was younger, but I think we're doing okay. And you find cool ways of doing stuff. I think if you're a band that grows, and I think what I'm trying to say is, I think we're in a good place. We're not young, but we're still rocking, I think, and we're still enjoying it, and I can't complain about that.
So you slightly show me a slightly insecure side, if that's fair to say, and you've obviously got moments where it's hard to impress yourself because you're your own worst critic, if that's fair to say that about you. you listen to your songs and you're your own worst enemy because you're probably reading the comments and taking them to heart, like you said, and really hard to kind of shun it off and say it's fine because we are very delicate little creatures. So when you're writing an album now, like Black Red, even Comfort in Sound, when you're writing it, Pushing the Senses, all this stuff, were you writing them for you or for the audience? Because if you're not happy, how are you going to go and play them on stage and kind of wear
I
a
mean,
mask?
don't get me wrong, I'm very confident in what I do, but I just, it's always kind of, it's it's a very personal thing doing music as well.
Yeah,
I don't I don't play stuff to people until I've really got to a point that I'm happy. And, even like the band, I don't send any attack until I'm really happy with something, because I want to present it in the way that, okay, you might not like it, but this is where I'm at with it, and then we'll go from there. Um, and I feel as though I don't think it's an insecurity. I think it's almost like, it's not even like striving for like perfection. It's just I there's like a way I hear things, and I have to get it to a certain place. And that's probably why I get into like production and stuff like that. It's just that kind of, you've got this film in your head, and you kind of want to make sure that it's in a certain place before you show that film to people. Of course, you can do some editing on the film
yeah.
afterwards. You can chop it up, and you can do so many things nowadays with Pro Tools, but you have to have that overall picture. I've always had a good head for that, and I'm quite lucky that I've always had. When I write songs, it is like, I know so many people say the same things. I think they probably have a similar procedure to me, but you are kind of like writing this little film in your head, even for little songs, like singles, like Insomnia. I mean, I was totally in America when I wrote that song in my head, and on the tour bus, and just all those places that we went to. And that's a great thing, when you have, that's a good thing about being an older band as well. You've experienced a bit more, so you sometimes have a bit more to write about. And I think that's probably a big reason why I'm still inspired to write stuff.
Do you think there's ever times where you get writer's block? Because I don't sense that from the fact you wrote.
Well, I mean, I put, look, every band is going to repeat certain things. There's certain formulas that you do, and I know I have a certain style, I have a certain guitar sound. And people go, "Oh, it sounds like that." It's like, you're always going to get that. Every band has that. You can't. Every band. It's just a natural thing. It's like an artist has a certain style. It's just making it feeling like each time you do a record, you're kind of trying new things, testing yourself, being pushed a bit. Maybe you're going to throw yourself and say, let's try and do a big string arrangement on this one. Let's get me to play some keyboards on this one. I'm not a great keyboard player, but I'll blag my way through it. Keyboard on that. Let's try a different. That sort of thing I really make a point of doing, and I like that, because that's what keeps it really interesting. You have your go-to things that I feel as though are part of that feeder sound and identity, and like part of how I feel I want my like guitar sound. But we still experiment a lot in the studio. It might sound like, oh, it just sounds like feeder, but every record has a slightly different thought behind it.
I
Even
don't agree. I don't agree that you just sound like Feeder. I don't agree. I think you've evolved. I think I've followed your journey from the Swim EP, and I think like most of my favorite bands, Radiohead, Paramore, all these bands, you've evolved as musicians and songwriters, and you have experimented, and you still know it's Feeder from the sound of your voice and the way a chorus makes you want to sing along, but you're never playing it safe. You're not just releasing an album of 12 versions of High.
No, I mean, every album has changed. I mean, on the first album, apart from High, which was the song which he wrote after on the, not the first release of, say, Apollo Things, it was
Yeah.
actually releasing for the American market. I wrote that song right at the end, and they were like, "You've got to put this song on. This is a hit record." I was like, "Okay, cool." Job I did, actually, because it did really well for us.
Yeah,
But
they were right, to be fair to them.
yeah, that was the only song I ever put any keyboards on a feeder track, and it's just a little string like quartet we got in. And I think I was working with Chris Sheldon. He knew Audrey Riley, and she was like absolutely amazing at doing strings. In fact, she ended up doing the strings on Tonight. The Smashing
Yeah.
Pumpkins. Mention them
Wow,
again.
that's cool.
She did the strings on Forget About Tomorrow with me. She's amazing. But anyway, so that was, so we'd never done anything like that. And then going into album number 2, Yes, They Went Too Soon, started to mess around with keyboards a bit more. And it became a bit more, I think, because we've been on tour in America, maybe a bit influenced by that whole Californian thing, and,
Yeah.
playing things like Everclear and stuff. It was a bit more upbeat stuff. So we didn't want to just, the first album was a bit more, there was pop songs on there, like Cement and things like that. But you had songs like Descend and all those sort of tracks, a little bit heavier. The second album became a bit more bouncy and anthemic. This is when we started to really mess around with strings and keyboards, and I think it just grew from there, really.
I love it. I love the fact that a lot more string sections came in. I could hear more harmonies with your vocals.
Mm.
Obviously, the change of drummer, awful circumstances, but it does change the dynamic of the band. It does.
It does. It does change the dynamic, and I think also, I always wanted to, work on strings. I just didn't know how to do it on the first record. I was just sort of, hey, we're in the studio. It's just all guitar parts and everything. Um, but because I remember buying the Beatles single. I was really young in Woolworths in Chepstow, which is like the town near where I grew up, and it was like this bargain basement box. You could buy like records for like 10p or something. There was a Beatles one in there. I mean, God, I wish I still had it. But I remember on the B side, it was like Eleanor Rigby, and I remember hearing that song, and I just thought, God, the strings on it's amazing. Even at that age, I just loved the way they sounded,
Yeah, they're amazing.
and that was always in my head. And even when we were doing High, I had that kind of thinking back to that song, and I love strings. When they're done well, I think they can sound great on
I know
songs.
this is becoming Smashing Pumpkins podcast, but tonight, when I first heard that and I saw it, and they played the MTV Awards, and Billy Corgan's playing that lovely little guitar bit at the start, just a sequence on the couple of chords. But when those strings come in, the power it adds to that chorus is epic,
Yeah,
absolutely unbelievable.
but yeah. Even like, and going back to Led Zeppelin, things like even like Kashmir and things like that.
Oh wow, yeah,
That's where bands were doing it like way before us and Pumpkins, all those bands. But when it's done well, it's really good. I mean, it can be, if it's done badly, it can be horrible.
yeah,
I mean, all the strings I do now, I just do at the bottom of my garden, just down there with, Tim. We start with cello and build up the parts. I'm quite good at it, now, two
yeah.
of us walk our way through. And you can build up a really good, sounding string arrangement. And it's a lot cheaper than going to Abbey Road or Air Studios where we went to do polythene and stuff like that. I still love to do that if we've got the budget, but you can do so much more with technology now, and I feel as though I know that because I've seen how it's done with real strings. I kind of learned quite a lot of that whole process, how you build them up, all the different parts, and it's not that hard. You don't have to be to score or anything like that. You can just do it.
No,
You hear it, and you just hear those little parts and sing them along, and yeah, I mean that's I love that whole process.
I
But
had I had Frank Turner on only a couple of weeks ago, and he's now got to the stage where he's producing his own albums because, like you, he's got his own little studio. He's going in there, he's demoing. He's spending that long on his demos now and polishing them. He can't really justify then getting an engineer and a producer in to then basically just polish what he's already done.
Well, that's basically what the last four Feeder albums have been. Obviously, I
Yeah,
worked with Tim as well, who's really great. He ended up sort of co-producing it, but so it's all done in a very small space, and obviously not the drums. I can't
no,
do. So we go to some good drum rooms, do the drums, bring it back here. So even all the guitars, everything was done there. I
that's awesome.
tack it to some bass at home, and then like sends it back to me, and then we reamp it and stuff. I do miss that. We used to go into a big studio, and it's a great, and sometimes I still love doing that. But you have to really be organized because number one, it's hard to find like really good studios, and they're really expensive. And I think
Yeah,
you have to be careful what you spend on a record because that the whole physical side of it is tiny compared to what it used to be. But at the same time, if you have the opportunity to do it, go for it because there's something great about being in that space. And I remember doing polythene. You have to be so much more committed. You couldn't. Once you've done it, that was it. Really, you couldn't sort of go back. Oh, let's go and time stretch it, put it in a different key. I mean, technology is just crazy now. But in some way, that's a great. In some ways, it's a blessing. In some ways, it's a curse.
does it? Be completely honest with me. Does it make you? And I don't mean this in a negative way. Does it make you lazier? And that isn't a negative word. It's as in you're in your shed, you go down to the bottom of your garden, you record in your studio, you're happy with the guitar, but you can always come back to it tomorrow and sleep on it. Where if you're in the studio, you're paying Chris Sheldon by the day.
Yeah.
You're so aware that that take needs to be absolutely the one.
Yeah.
Does it
I think
feel
you have to
like
be, yeah, I think you just have to be, well, in some way, you have to be more disciplined because you have to really know when to stop.
yeah,
That's a part of being, the whole production thing because you have to know, well, do I need that guitar part? And as much as I love putting 50 guitar parts in every song, I think actually what I do now, one thing that took me like 20 years to really get sort of focused on is I write, even if they're not 100% like the final lyrics, I basically get the vocals written really up front, because you can talk to any producer, I guarantee they'll say, "Yeah, I'm in the studio, it's going really well, but the singer hasn't written the lyrics yet," and he's in the corner like sweating, like already dreading how to do his vocals anyway, because it's always a bit nerve wracking doing vocals when you've got a big and he hasn't written the lyrics. It happens all the time, even to big artists.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a lot of polythene stuff. I was still writing it on my knee in the studio, and I literally would sometimes sing a line I just written, and so now I think certainly on the last sort of 4 or 5 albums, I've been a lot more focused, and I get the vocal on there really early, and often that ends up being the vocal. Okay, I normally go back to it and tidy it up, or
Yeah.
sing some other lines, or I'm not happy with that line. It sounds a bit weird, so I might we're dropping the line, make sure we got the same settings and the same mic. You can normally match it pretty well. So yeah, I think you have to be. I think it's a danger that you can have too much time now and overcook it as well. And it's that, when do you stop? You can just go down there and.
Well, my next question to you, literally, Grant, was going to be, how do you be so strict on yourself to then say enough's enough? Because I use this example all the time on the podcast. An artist will always keep brushing away or adding more color or painting. As a songwriter, especially when you have the controls, like a band like Thrice that have their own studio,
Yeah.
surely you need that external party or that fifth member or somebody different that can come in and be like, that's enough now. Otherwise, you're going to do 250 guitar overdubs and lose yourself.
Well, I just have to be really, if I'm producing it with Tim, I just have to be. I'm just like very aware of that.
Yeah,
You know, and I asked him to, ask
is
him.
your relationship that strong? He can just be like, Grant, stop now. That's enough.
Yeah, we don't normally get to that. So I normally put them on. I normally take them off. But whether it's Tim or Chris, whoever I work with, or when I work with Gil, Gil's an amazing producer. He's done some legendary stuff. But you know, even he'd say, "Oh no, I think we've got enough guitars on that." And I said, "Oh, just do a few more." And he wouldn't say no. He'd let me try it, but he'd often take it off afterwards. It wasn't needed.
Not tell you. There you go. There's the
I learned,
master.
I learned a lot from people like Gil, because he really, I really grew up, I think, in the studio after working with him, because he was pretty tough. But I wouldn't be able to do what I do now, I think, if I hadn't worked with people like that, because
Yeah,
it's I wouldn't have the balls to say, yeah, I can produce something, because I feel as though, Gil is amazing. It's not just about, you've got producers that are engineers who just like
yeah,
record really well, don't really say much, they'll just do it. A bit like the kind of Steve Albini approach. He'll just capture you, and that's what you are. Amazing producer. Sadly no longer with us. And then you've got producers that are slightly more. They're working with an engineer, and they're very much about the vocals, making sure the singer's right, got the lyrics right, or they're amazing with drummers. And Gil's a bit like that. He's somewhere between Rick Rubin, and who's very much sort of got a very different outlook on the way that you produce stuff. Um, and an engineer. That's kind of what he is. And I just learned so much from him. And I've worked with some great people over the years, and some great mixers as well.
two of my favorites, generally Gil Norton and Chris Sheldon. You've done them both, so I'm like, wow.
Yeah, Adrian Bushby as well. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
fantastic engineer. We've worked with some great mixers. We did some. We worked with Andy Wallace a bit on the second album. He mixed Insomnia and a few tracks. I mean, that was
How
amazing.
cool is that?
It was cool to be sat in the room with Andy Wallace. We were, obviously quite in awe of him at the time. Yeah, we worked with some great people. We've been very lucky. We worked. Alan Moulder did a mix of Just the Day. Not there was two mixes of it, but he did like an alternative mix. Obviously, Alan Moulder's done some amazing stuff. Yeah, we've been very lucky. We haven't worked with I never met worked with Rick Rubin. I've met him, but I've not actually
Yeah.
worked. But yeah, you know what? It's just about what you talked about. Saying a little bit of insecurities, whatever. I think as an artist, as a band, you need a bit of guidance, or sometimes you need someone just to help you on that journey. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes a good producer as well, especially when it doesn't matter whether you're a young band or an old band. I think artists need that sometimes.
would you be that person for another band? Would you
I
produce
would
someone
be if it's the
else?
right band. I would love to produce stuff, and I think I'd be good, and I think I'd be good at dealing with all the demons that I deal with sometimes, all that those little things you get in the studio sometimes. Especially when you're singing as well. So I think you always feel that pressure. Um, uh, yeah, I think I would. I do get asked quite a lot. I think the whole the whole production world isn't quite as good as it used to be. I don't think people can afford producers anymore. It's like,
Everyone's
but
got apps now. Everyone's doing it at home
I know.
themselves.
But if there's something I really loved, I would do it. Yeah, I'd work with it. I'd work with a really good engineer and do it that way, so I can really focus on the band and getting the arrangements
I
right.
can imagine you doing it. I've got a vision of, a few years time when you're like, yeah, I found a band, I love them, I'm gonna produce their album for
A
them.
few
Like,
things. I've done a few things. I just don't tell people about it. But I've done a
no.
couple of things and a few collaboration things. But I've been offered lots. I mean, in the hundreds. But it's just sort of I won't do it unless I know I can feel like so I can bring something to it. And also, I have to really like the band or artist, and also it has to fit around what I'm doing with the feeder stuff as well.
So what's the rest of the year looking like? I've seen you've got a few festivals, lots and lots of UK dates, some Europe stuff. You've got still quite a lot of
Yeah.
shows in the calendar.
Yeah, because this is like a double album. I know we don't want to sort of over milk it, but it's like two records. So I'm not just going to say, okay, you put the album out, it's gone now. You know, People are still digesting it, and I think that I'm not going to rush the next feeder record, even though I've got an album's worth of stuff
I
already.
was about to say, is it finished yet?
But there is, but I don't want to rush it. So maybe I don't want people to feel like, oh god, they're back again with another album. So I think we're going to do something different next year. We will be doing something, but we won't be doing a big long tour or anything like that. We might do a few selected festivals, and maybe I've got a few plans here for something. Probably find out about soon. I can't tell you right now, but we will be doing something a little bit different. Um, I don't. It's very unlikely there'll be a feeder album next year, a new album. We may drop something new. We may
Yeah,
go old school and do a few EPs or something a bit
that'd be
different.
cool.
Something old, something that I know our fan base, will love. And I think it's just the album process and that. Sometimes it's quite nice to break that cycle, and we haven't really done it. we always, it's album tour album. The only time we ever broke that cycle is when we took some time out and I did a solo record and Taka was
Yeah.
in Japan. Um, and that lasted a bit longer than I planned.
What about another solo album from you?
I'd really like to re-release my first one because not enough people have heard it,
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that record. And it's kind of, I know it's just an album that's like really close to my heart, and I just think it's a really interesting record, and it's sort of me a bit more stripped back, you
Yeah.
know, without all the layers of the feeder stuff there, which I love. It hasn't got the big heavy guitars on, it hasn't, but it's still very much. I think I'd be surprised if they're people that if they haven't heard that album already, which is called Yorktown Heights, and they like Feeder. I'd be surprised if there wasn't at least a song or two on there that they'd still like, even though it hasn't got big,
Yeah.
you know.
And would you do the whole every band at the moment I know from that era kind of doing anniversary shows for certain albums and playing them in entirety? I know it's a few years off for Polyphene or
Yeah,
something, but is there
that might be something we're thinking of, but I didn't tell you.
right, okay.
But yeah, the thing is, it's quite tricky with us because I think we've got more than one album that we could do like that. And I think, some is interesting because Echo Park is really popular. It's not my favorite Feeder album, I have to admit, but to be fair, I did listen to it the other day, and I think there is some good moments on that record, and there's a few good tunes on there. And I thought, you know what? I know people think of that record as being like Buck Rogers and that, but there is a bit more to it if you actually listen
Yeah,
to that.
it's a great album.
Quite an interesting little album. It's quite quirky and funny. It's got some interesting tracks on it. So that song, that album is really popular. So I'm sure if I said we're going to go out and do like an Echo Park tour, I'm sure there'd be a few happy Feeder fans. But obviously, Comfort and Sound is our biggest record.
Yeah,
That's I'd love to do a Polythene one.
I'd
Go
love that. That would
and
be
just do it
amazing.
before I'm too old to do it because it's quite a physical record. That um,
But pick some like really cool little venues as well. That'd be awesome. Like,
yeah, I mean, I would like to do it. I think it depends on the record. I think if we're doing Polythene, I'd do that in a bit more grassroots way. But I think if we were doing one of the bigger records, we'd
Yeah.
like a thing of that
Well, that
because,
could be a big, huge places, but I think
well,
Polythene in like really nice small venues would be amazing,
yeah,
like limited tickets, amazing.
even if we were offered doing like two arena shows on one of the big albums or whatever it was, or
Yeah,
four, which I know sounds crazy, but actually sometimes when you do like a best of or whether you do a big album, it it's a whole different thing. And some people, really love that experience actually more than just going to see a normal album tour. So you
yeah.
don't quite know. I mean, I don't know whether if we, how popular it would be if you put something like that on sale. It'd be interesting to see. But just from bands that I love, I know when they go out and they do that record, it's always tempting to go and see it because it's like, oh, that just brings back all those memories.
I love it, especially when a festival band play and they do an exclusive set, and you're like, oh my God, they're playing their entire album. Like that's great.
Well, even in the day, even when he did those albums when that came out, very few bands would have played the whole album. They
Yeah,
probably played four or five songs. If
yeah.
maybe some occasionally did a special night where they might have done, but quite rarely. You
Well,
might
that's what I'm
see.
thinking. When you said Echo Park, I'm thinking to myself, there must be a couple of tracks on that album you've never played live.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah. So how cool is that? I feel like
yeah.
new songs again.
It's a lot of work. We'll have to learn it all and learning new albums. So it'll be doing it. It's still a lot of work. In fact, it's actually in some way more work than when you've done a new album because those are still kind of fresh in your system.
Yeah.
But it makes it really exciting. And I thought I've always been like, oh no, I'm not doing that. I've always dissed it. I've been asked so many times by a label, can we re-release that and do that? No, I'm not doing it. I just been like, no, I want to do new stuff. I'm moving forward. But I don't know whether
Next
it's
week, Feeder announced every single album tour ever.
I don't know whether it's my age or just seeing, you mentioned Pumpkins and Weezer and bands like that, and lots of others. That when they come back and they do that, and there's a lot of people doing it now, there's something really exciting about it. I think that I'm at a point now where I don't feel as though I need to prove anything as a writer. I still want to try and write the best song I can and make the best Feeder record we can. But maybe it's quite nice to maybe, we're still going to do some new music, but to maybe look back and maybe enjoy something that we've already done.
Yeah.
That a lot of enjoyment to people that bought it. So
Just celebrate, a big night of celebration. That's what you
it
want, the
feels like a good
fans there.
now. Yeah, and I feel as though I'm kind of ready to maybe do something like that. So that may be something we do to tick the box before the next record. I'm like, that's
That's a
what
nice filler, isn't it? It's a nice gap.
it is, and we've never done it. And I think most bands have probably done virtually every album if they've been together for 30 years. But
Yeah.
we've never done a live album either, which I've always dissed. But now I'm a bit more comfortable. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe we might do a live album as well.
I love live albums. Like they
Yeah,
are not as popular as they used to be. I used to go out and like buy the Oasis. I remember buying it on CD and be like, wow. But because of Spotify and stuff now, bands aren't really doing it. But oh God, a good live album and
that's
it's
more
done.
reason to do it. That's why I did a double album. It's like we're
Yeah,
not trying to do double albums when anymore. Like some people I know, Taylor Swift did, the pop artists she
yeah.
did, and the Johnny Marr did one. But there isn't many, and everyone goes, "Oh, you're mad doing a double album now." It's like CDs and albums come and go so quick. I'm like, that's exactly why I want to do it. We're an old school band.
Yeah, and you've done it now. You can say you've done your Melancholy and Infinitive Sadness. You've done it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've always loved that, and it is a statement. And I'm really proud of Black Red. I think it's an album that, in 5 years' time, I think it will be one that I think a lot of Feeder fans are still going to dig. And I think
I'm
it's
digesting it. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm because it's such a big, two albums. I treat it as one album,
yeah,
and a journey from start to finish. And I'm just digesting it. I'm taking my time with it, listen to it when I'm driving, listen to it at home. And I love some of the songs, but I'm like letting it just kind of tell its own story and kind of simmer, and then it'll get better and better, and I'll fall in love with more hooks and vocals and harmonies. And before you know it, I'll love it as a whole piece.
yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it's a whole piece. I know I
Yeah.
said in the press it's two separate albums because I kind of made it feel like it worked like that. So I want it to be, hey, this is a lot of songs here in one go. It's not overly long though for a double album if
No,
you think about it. It's only just over an hour. So it's not like crazy long. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some single albums that are that long,
of course, yeah.
but prog epics. But I had that sort of, oh, is it too prog rock doing double album thing? But I said that's why I want to do it even more, and I just felt this was a good time to do it. I think there's some good songs on that record. I think it ticks a lot of boxes. It's easier for me to look back on it and listen to it now, hearing what it has, than when I was actually doing it. I can hear, elements of lots of Feeder records on this, but it's a slightly different journey. This one, I think, sonically, like you said, I think we've learned to do certain things better, and I think some of the sounds are better. And I think that you know, I think that all the things I like about our early work is kind of in there. There's like little snippets of it, but I feel as though sonically it just feels, I don't know, it just feels in a better place to me. Some people may disagree, but that's how I feel about it. But it was there's a lot of work went into that record. But when I look back on it now, it doesn't seem like a lot of work, but at the time it did.
Well, I like the idea that maybe we're going to get an announcement soon of something special, probably some EPs next year, a chance to get to see you live, and then an album in a couple of years, which must be tough for you knowing that you've already got probably an album and a half's material done.
It is tough, and I think I get frustrated because I always want to do a new, put out something new. I just love that, but I don't know. I mean, it's bad enough. I'm a nightmare at doing set lists because I just analyze it, I overanalyze it because I want it to be the perfect gig. Um, but it's so difficult doing a set list now. And when we get off of festivals, unless it's a certain length, it's like, oh my god! By the time you put those in, there's no time to play any of these. So it's a nice problem to have, but we do have hundreds of songs, and and it was in a perfect world, I would play some of our more what's I say, abstract tracks at
Yeah.
festivals. I know it's not the right thing to do because at festivals, when people's attention span is very short, they've had a lot of there are a lot of booze. They just want to go out there and have a great time, sing along and party. And so you can still rock out, but I think you just got to get a good balance, a good mix.
Yeah. People want the hits. They want to sing along.
They want some bangers in there as well. And I think
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what band you see, whether you like them or not. If you know the songs, it helps a lot. you know.
Grant,
Um,
I think you might remember this from last time, but what I always do on every episode of Mark and Me is I ask the guests to pick a song that plays out after the interview. It can be any song by any band. I can't actually remember because it's been a couple of years what song you chose. Actually, it might have been Led Zeppelin, but I can't remember. But I wondered what you'd love today as a closing track to today's interview.
very difficult. Oh dear me. I mean, should we do something from? I mean, I'm trying to think. We've had conversations about some bands from similar eras here to us.
I'm putting a ban on any Smashing Pumpkins. Otherwise, Billy Corgan's had too much time on this
No, I'm
episode.
not doing it now, and I'm not so much attention already. Yeah, unless he wants to get us on the next tour, then
That would be good. Yeah,
I think that would be a great lineup. I think everyone should go out there and say we want Feeder to tour Smashing Pumpkins. I think it would be one hell of a lineup.
that
Um,
would be good.
or we're happy to go out with Weezer as well. That would be a good one. Um, trying to think. You know what? I'm gonna pick something a little bit random, and I'm gonna go with, just because I heard it the other day, I thought this is a great song. Um, oof, God, I'm trying to think now. I've completely changed my mind. I'm gonna go with a Peter Gabriel track.
Oh, that surprised me.
I know. Well, I'm a massive Peter Gabriel fan as
I
well.
just didn't think you're going to throw that at me.
Yeah, I know. I know it's a bit of a curveball because I thought, well, I'll keep you guessing. I'm gonna go with Red Rain,
Wow.
Gabriel. It's an awesome track, and believe it or not, I listen to a lot of Peter Gabriel, and his name, when we're doing a lot of production stuff, his name comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Even though you probably don't hear it in our music, but there's a little bit of 80s stuff going on with this new record. I don't know if you got any of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, definitely.
And we would, talking about a lot of that 80s like production and stuff like that. Some American bands and that whole 80s thing. And Peter Gabriel touched on that, and he did it really well. So that's why I've picked this track.
Thank you for coming back on, dude. It's been a really, really positive and just amazing kind of trip down memory lane, and I'm really excited now about what this announcement's going to be.
Yeah. Well, we're still doing it, and we're still around for a bit longer. So hopefully people aren't too sick of us.
Of course not. Thank you, dude, for your time today. It means a lot.
Hey, thanks a lot. Really enjoyed it.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and the amazing Grant Nicholas. Such a great interview. So open, so honest. I love the chat. And as you heard, we were teasing. He didn't quite say it, but we now know that he was hinting at the Comfort in Sound tour. This is going to be epic. Playing the album in its entirety. One of the greatest albums out there. One of my favourites by Feeder. That and Polyphene. Untouchable. And if you're listening to this right now, tickets are available through, I think, September and October in the UK. There's loads of great dates. I'm going to go to the Birmingham show. Go and grab yourself a ticket. It will be awesome to celebrate this amazing album and just celebrate a live gig. I mean, that's genuinely one of the best nights out. I want to say now a massive thanks to Grant for coming on the episode. It's so good to have you back on. I'm sorry it's taken a while to get the episode out there, but I'm so glad it's been saved and we didn't lose it completely. That would have been the most depressing thing ever. Also, I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast, Richer Sounds. If you're in the market to buy yourself a brand new record deck, or maybe you want to get yourself some headphones to listen to bands like Feeder, go to richersounds.com or any of their high street stores. And the great guys at Vice Press. As always, if you're looking to get yourself an amazing print, some artwork, all absolutely licensed, and also save yourself 10%, go on vicepress.com, get yourself something awesome, add it to the basket, and in the discount box, just type in Mark and Me 10, the number 10, and you'll get yourself 10% off. So thanks again to both of the sponsors. Also, guys, if you're a Feeder fan or you've only just tuned in to Mark and Me and discovered it because of Feeder, what I ask on every episode is that as you're listening, please share the episode. You've all got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Please go on there and just share the episodes because it really goes a long way and means the absolute world to me. I do have a Patreon account. I know times are tough, but if you can, for as little as £1 a month, for that, you literally get episodes that aren't available to anyone else called the Lost Tapes. You get an exclusive badge. You get a monthly newsletter. You get absolutely loads. And all that goes right back into the production of the podcast. Allows me to go out there and record more interviews for you guys at home, which basically means you get more podcasts. Now, I'm going to go because it's only a couple of days until I give you another episode of Mark and Me. So before I go, I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen. I urge you all to go and get yourself a ticket to see Feeder at the end of the year. Go and listen to Feeder, look after yourself, and I'll speak to you all in a few days' time.
Well, I've seen them buried in a shelter. down all over me. I'm bathing in red rain coming down. Red rain is coming down. Red rain is coming down all over me. I'm begging you, red rain coming down. Red rain coming down. Red rain coming down. Red rain coming down.